Okay, folks, it's your buddy Mike Messier. I had a subscriber requested Rant. Mark Thiethke in the World's Greatest Wrestling Group Facebook group wanted me to address his question. Did fans at the time think that Bruno Sammartino or Bob Backlund were actually beatable during their WWF extended title reigns? In Bruno's case, it was 2 reigns, and I think I know Bruno was there as champion when it was Worldwide Wrestling Federation. Kind of like the worldwide of sports. It's interesting how certain words, certain phrases come in and out of the lexicon. Worldwide, Worldwide Wrestling Federation, Worldwide Sports. If you look at, or a wide world of sports, if you looked at extreme, extreme sports, extreme this, that, and the other, Extreme Championship Wrestling in the 90s. Let's go back to the original question. Bruno was before my time too as well, but I have, as a wrestling historian, I've done my research and I've explored this. I think Bruno was pretty much thought to be unbeatable. And Mark was asking this in reference to comparisons against Roman Reigns. Do people just think that Roman's going to win every single time? Obviously, a lot of people, not me, thought that Cody Rhodes would beat Roman Reigns for the title at WrestleMania last year. He didn't. He failed. He failed his father's memory. Cody did. But let's go back to Bruno. From what I know, you could ask historians like Evan Ginsberg, Nikita Breznikov, they're wrestling historians on Facebook. They would probably tell you that most fans thought Bruno was unbeatable. And when you get into 7.5 years for his first reign, and I think 4.25 years for his second reign, Bruno did seem quite unbeatable. Backlund, I can comment a little bit differently. And I mentioned this to Mark in the Facebook, but I think I want to explore this a little more here on video. Bob Backlund did lose a lot of matches when he was champion. There's a couple of controversies with Backlund, like 3 that I can point out, or at least 2. He had some type of really interesting, and I think they happened within the same, 12 months or so. I believe Backlund actually 2 years or so into his first WWF title reign, the one from like 78 to 83, I believe he went over to Japan and lost the title cleanly, I think, to Antonio Inoki. And then a few days later, it was weird. Like Backlund, I think, just basically lost to Antonio Inoki, but the WWF didn't want to have the title change, even though there was a title change in Japan. I don't know if that was some type of swerve. And I'm thinking they didn't even do like a legitimate rematch in Japan for Backlund to get the title. Instead, when Backlund came back to New York, there was a match in Madison Square Garden, you can look this up, where Backlund defeated Bobby Duncum for the vacant title. Now, I don't know if they announced that to the live crowd. I'd really like more information about this myself, but I don't know if the live crowd in New York's Madison Square Garden was informed, hey folks, Bob Backlund lost the title to Antonio Inoki in Japan, but we're going to have this match between Backlund and Bobby Duncum here for the vacant title. I don't even know if they announced that to the live crowd or if it was just something to, I don't know. You remember back then, folks, we didn't have internet, we didn't have dirt sheets for the most part. I mean, this was all kind of subterfuge. You listened to what you were told, and if you happen to have a subscription, they didn't even have Pro Wrestling Illustrated to 1979, I think. So the other after mags that was before that one, Sports Review Wrestling, the Wrestler Inside Wrestling, but that information would get to you like 3 months late. So the fans were really in the dark quite a bit. So to answer the question, Backlund had this weird thing with Inoki. If you look at the statistics now, or the WWE, record books, they don't really list Antonio Inoki as a WWF champion. Sometimes that's brought up once in a while, but and I think they might have done something in Japan where like Inoki relinquished the title or said he didn't deserve it or some crazy horse shit. Then you have, and this is the problem that, when you talk about from Forbidden Door, this has been going on for 40 or 50 years. When different wrestling promotions work with each other, especially with titles, especially back then when titles meant something, Mark, it was kind of a tough thing because it was like, these guys, their promotions, the livelihood really did kind of depend on the fans thinking that there was value in these championships. So they weren't just passing around the titles like hot potatoes, and there was some controversies and stuff. Let's move forward, though. The second controversy was this match you can actually find on YouTube. I sat through it. I think it was later that same year. I think it was after the Inoki Duncombe Backlund thing. But basically, once again, Madison Square Garden, Bob Backlund and Greg Valentine have a match. It's actually a really funny finish. It's like, basically what I want to say is Backlund's giving Greg Valentine the airplane spin. Valentine's leg flails into the referee. The referee gets knocked down. Then somehow Backlund and Valentine, they fall to the mat. Backlund pins Valentine. The referee is groggy because he got hit by Valentine's leg. He comes over and he counts a 1, 2, 3 on Backlund pinning Valentine. The referee calls for the bell, but then somehow Valentine recoups, and Valentine gives Backlund a cheap shot to the groin or punches him or something, and Valentine somehow explains to the groggy referee that Valentine had just pinned Backlund, and the referee selling that he is all confused because he hit by the leg. The referee calls and says, oh yes, Valentine just pinned Backlund, even though the referee himself just counted Valentine's shoulders down. The idea is that the referee is so bewildered and not confused from getting kicked that he doesn't even know who he counted out. So Valentine is actually able to sell with his heel tactics that he pinned Bob Backlund, and they actually give the belt to Valentine, and then there's all this confusion, and then I think they had a rematch the next month, which Backlund won. Now the funny thing is, when they would have this situation in Madison Square Garden, they wouldn't go around the circuit, the house show circuit, the loop. I mean, that's all you had back then. You didn't have pay-per-views. You just, house shows were the only shows you had. So if they went to the Capitol Center in Landover, Maryland, or Pittsburgh or Philly, they probably just had Backlund come out and defend the title as normal, and they didn't even mention the Backlund-Valentine situation. You know what I mean? So it's interesting how wrestling and the promoters could do all these weird things. I'm always learning stuff too, Mark. I mean, I'm just like you. Well, maybe not just like, but I'm always learning information. Apparently, the Worldwide Wrestling Federation back then, it really was different regional promoters who would have to somehow agree on things. Like the different promoters who would work the WWF would actually promote things separately. It wasn't just Vince McMahon or Vince McMahon Jr., sticking their thumb up everybody's regional ass. It was these own promoters promoting their own shows and booking their own shows, and I'm assuming that they had to keep some things straight with each other as far as titles and so forth, but interesting stuff. Now, Backlund, the other thing that I can't tell you because I experienced this towards the tail end of Backlund's first title reign, the 78 to 83 one, he did lose a lot of matches on what was called cuts. Now, this was very infuriating as a wrestling fan. In fact, I actually, believe it or not, attended one of these matches. You go to a match, it's Bob Backlund, the world WWF champion, defending against Don Morocco, the Intercontinental champion. Morocco's title is not on the line. They're having this really good match, and then Backlund somehow gets bloodied by Morocco, and Backlund's bleeding, and the referee stops the match, and he says that Backlund cannot continue on cuts because of cuts. What does that mean? It's meaning he's bleeding too much, so we have to stop the match. So do you give the title to Morocco because he just beat the guy so bad he couldn't continue? Nope, Backlund gets to keep the title. So it was very infuriating as a fan because you're like, well, what the fuck? I mean, the champion just lost, but the referees say, well, he doesn't lose his title because I had to stop the match because of blood. He wasn't pinned or submitted. And this happened quite a fucking bit, okay? So if you look into the history of Bob Backlund, and if you see his match results, losing the match on cuts, tons of times he did this to Morocco, a few other times to other guys, but basically it seems like it would be a referee's stoppage. And then when Backlund lost the title to the Iron Sheik, well, what's his dick, Arnold Scollin, threw in the towel, Backlund's manager, and they gave the title to the Sheik. So how come they didn't give the title to Morocco all those times he won those matches on cuts? That's just the magic what if of wrestling, Mark, okay? So have a great weekend, everyone. If you have more subscriber requested rants, I had another subscriber, AJ Norris, wanted to know about my thoughts on Dolph Ziggler. So watch that video, watch all my videos, and subscribe.